The Change of Hands by Christian Smith. Epilogue. I'm done. Can't do this anymore. It's too much. These were the thoughts rushing around inside of the little man's head. This power I've been given, it's not a gift. It's a curse. I'm done with not being able to touch my wife without crushing her bones. I'm done with this strength. I'm not meant to be a hero. I never was. But someone else maybe was. Maybe someone else can use this better than I have. And so the small old man hobbled around the grocery store that he had been visiting since before he received this curse, and the old man quietly reached out his wrinkled hand and softly brushed against a young boy's arm. At the exact moment of contact, he focused hard and pushed out the power. He expelled the power like squeezing toothpaste out of a tube. He felt a great force leave his body, and the small boy felt a small shock, but that was all. Or was it? Chapter 1. Don't come in! Christian shouted loudly to his mother outside his bedroom door. I'm naked and stuff, so please don't. Honey, you've been in there for 30 minutes. How are you still changing? I just need some time, Mom. Something happened at church, and I need some time. I need time. This, of course, was a lie. But it was better that way, because Christian's mom might just have a stroke if she saw what was going on in her son's room. Christian was hanging upside down from the ceiling, with multiple strands of spiderwebbing suspending him up. White stringy web was strung almost carelessly all around the room. Finally, Christian's mom decided that her son deserved his privacy, even if it wasn't for what she thought. What's happened to me? Christian whispered out loud. Just a day ago, he was a normal teenager, whose only worries were school, friends, and girls. But today, things were different. Today, he was worrying how he was going to disconnect himself from the ceiling, a worry he thought he'd never have. He'd arrived home a couple hours earlier from church to find that he could shoot white strands of stringy web out of a small hole in his wrist. That hole definitely wasn't there before, Christian thought. On top of the new-found string-launching ability, he also felt stronger than ever before. This fact was proven by the mangled and twisted doorknob on his room door. I'm a freak! What have I become? Christian used all of his newfound strength to reach up and slowly pry away the webs binding his feet to the ceiling. After another 30 minutes of painful suspension, Christian finally freed himself and dropped to the floor with a... He immediately noticed that the webbing had been strung across all his room, and now was almost disappeared. Well, that's a plus. At least I'll have less to clean up. Even a homeless man in Hawaii would realize exactly what Christian had become. All the abilities pointed to it. Christian turned his head to look at his vast wall of Marvel superhero posters. But particularly, he was staring at one poster. A poster that said, "The Amazing Spider-Man." It's so obvious now, Christian mumbled. I'm frickin' Spider-Man. All Christian's dreams of becoming a superhero seemed a lot less painful than his experience had been. Once again, Christian reached out his arm, straight at the poster. He opened his palm and squeezed every muscle in his arm. Immediately, a stream of web rushed towards the wall, slamming into the poster and covering Peter Parker's head in a glob of white string. As the next few days passed, Christian honed in on his abilities until he could control his webs and strength with ease. But other than in private, Christian never used his powers, other than the one day when he wanted to beat a kid named Mac at church in an arm wrestle. Trust me, Christian won. But it wasn't like in the movies. Criminals weren't on every street corner. Christian lived in the suburbs, and the extent of crime in his city was a couple troublemakers doing drugs. Where's my opportunity to be a hero? Christian thought. He truly didn't know. Chapter 2. In a stealth jet above Ohio. "Where's the power now?" a gruff voice shouted. "There's no need to shout, Graham. I can hear your wonderful voice." Graham responded, "Whatever, that's not the point. I want to know what happened to the old guy." A man named Stewart again responded, "You're the one who lost it in the first place. Shouldn't you know?" "Listen, Stu. Under extreme fear or surprise, the power can leave the host without the host's consent," Graham sarcastically replied. "So what exactly was so scary about an old man, Graham?" Stewart calmly asked. "Oh, shut up, Stu. The old dude wasn't scary. I was trying to rob an old cripple, and then a freaking car horn made me jump." "So because of a little scary car horn, you gave up the amazing power of invisibility," Stewart noted with an annoyed voice. "Stu, we can get it back. We just gotta find the person that the cripple gave his power to, and scare the power out of him. Which takes me back to my first question. Where the flip is the power now, Stu?"
Our sensors can only detect the energy, Graham, when it is outside of a host body, which only occurred for a split second when the man transferred the power into the child. Our sensors detected a small blip of energy at a nearby grocery store, and so, Graham, I say we start there.
Fine, fine. They need to make a big speech about it, Stu.
My name is not Stu, Stewart yelled uncharacteristically. Call me Stewart.
Okay, goodness, no need to yell. Let's just figure this out, okay? Then we can leave it all behind us and move on,
Graham replied. Okay, anyways, all we have to do is hack the security camera in the grocery store. Then we can acquire the identity of the child. The two villains steered the invisible jet in the sky, then dove down many thousand feet until they were hovering over Aunt Joan's Healthy Market, a small grocery store in the middle of a town by the name of Westlake. The jet's hover feature allowed the high-tech vehicle to float inches above the building's surface without a single problem. Then Stewart explained the situation to Graham in a tone used most times to a 5-year-old. So, at this height, Graham, our computer system can connect to the camera's memory database so that we can watch all of the footage of the last day. He tapped a few buttons on the dashboard, and immediately the screen on the jet's dash lit up and showed a wide selection of camera angles in the store. The energy transfer registered on our sensors at 7:32 p.m. last night, Stewart noted. He then backed all the cameras up to 7:31 p.m. and started to watch for any unusual activity.
There!
Graham pointed out. Looking to the bottom left screen, Stewart enlarged the picture and watched carefully. Then he saw it, an old man reaching out to a young boy, and then the young boy jumped a little, as if shocked. That's him, Stewart affirmed. He paused the video, changed camera angles, and zoomed in on the face. Run it through the recognition program, Graham. We have a boy to catch. Chapter 3. Saturday night, Christian was on his way home, riding his bike. He was just returning from his friend Eric's house after a great day of activities. Christian had revealed his great spider powers to Eric, and was both worried and happy for what he'd done. Christian had shot a strand of web to one of the tallest trees in Eric's backyard. He then scaled up the tree and then jumped using a selection of carefully shot webs to swing his way back down.
Holy crap,
Eric had said when Christian landed back at ground level. Eric had been amazed, but was easily convinced not to tell, or at least Christian hoped so. As Christian continued to bike his way home, he stopped at an intersection, waiting for the light to turn green. Then he felt a sharp pain in his neck, like a bee sting times 12. He quickly slapped his neck where the pain had been, but he felt nothing. There must have been a mosquito, he thought. But dang, that hurt. 100 feet above this situation, Stuart's stealth jet was floating triumphantly. Good shot, Graham, Stuart complimented. You don't do well very often, but I can always trust your marksmanship. We were lucky. Those street cams enabled us to find him averagely easily, but that tracker you just implanted will help immensely. Now we must wait for the right time to strike. Chapter 4. Christian filed in with many others, filing into the rows of pews in the church. As he sat listening to the sermon, his mind kept wandering. He felt anxious. Something felt off that he couldn't explain. A couple minutes passed, but he still felt quite uneasy, until all his worries became justified, as two masked men swung through the auditorio windows, clutching lines that were connected to a hovering jet. But because the jet was cloaked, to all the bystanders, the lines looked like they were hooked onto thin air. The men dropped into the auditorium's middle row, and they pulled out two large machine guns with two chicks. Of course, Stuart was the first to speak, leaving Graham standing dumbly in the middle row. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We have not come to harm anyone, nor have we come to take anyone. But we have come to take something, Stuart rambled out. There's a child here that has something that is ours. Christian, I know you're here. Just give me back the power, and I'll leave with nobody harmed. Everyone in the church looked dumbfounded at Christian, confused at what was going on. Come on, boy, Stuart continued. Just come over here and give it back. Then we'll go on our way, and it will be as if nothing ever happened. Scanning the crowd, Stuart finally spotted the face he recognized so well from the security cameras. Come now, Christian. No need for a fight. Just come over here, or I'll have to start shooting. Christian finally replied, What if I don't want to give it up? He seemed unsure of the words coming out of his mouth. Up to this point, Christian's family thought this was one big mistake, but when Christian replied to the skinny man in the black suit, they realized that Christian was truly involved in something that was a mystery to them. And so Stuart walked over to the pew closest to him, grabbed a tall, skinny boy, and pressed the gun to his head. No, Chatham! Christian yelled as he stood up from the pew. Ah, so you do know this boy. Ha ha ha. Well then, boy, give it up or watch him die. Now everything in the two villains' plan seemed foolproof, but they had one small hole in their plan. They had no clue what power the boy had received from the man, but they thought it was just some form of super strength, for this ability was quite common for those who received the power. Though it was true that Christian had attained enhanced strength, Stuart hadn't taken into account what would happen if Christian had received, say, web shooting abilities. In what seemed to be a flash, Christian snapped his arm up and shot a ball of web straight at the gun. In his spare time, Christian had been practicing all different ways to shoot webbing. He had learned to make large spread webs, strings of long web balls on the end of a string to use for bashing, and lastly, he learned to shoot super concentrated balls that could knock out an elk. One such ball was speeding towards Stuart, faster than a speeding bullet. The web sphere hit Stuart's gun so hard that it not only knocked the gun out of his hand, but it hit with such speed that Stuart's hand stung worse than an electric shock. "No!" Stuart yelled as Chatham scrambled away. Stuart went from mad to berserk, and he dashed straight towards Christian. Christian shot a wide spread of web right at Stuart's chest. It wrapped around Stuart, causing him to topple onto Christian. But then, as Stuart laid there sprawled awkwardly on top of Christian, his bare hand touched Christian's arm, and because Christian was in so much turmoil, he couldn't hold back the power, and it started to enter Stuart. Christian was aware of what was happening, and he tried with all his might to stop the power from leaving his body. All he accomplished was to slow it down, but it was inevitable, and Christian was going to lose his spider abilities permanently.
"Stuart, no!
Graham shouted from the other side of the auditorium.
You promised me the power would be mine! You lied!"
And so Graham switched the setting on his bulky rifle so that it went from shooting bullets to shooting pure electricity. At this point, with Stuart sprawled on top of Christian, the power, which I'm now going to refer to as Power X, was in an in-between state. Half of the power was inside of Christian, and the other half in Stuart. But there is absolutely no way to stop the transfer once it has begun, or so Stuart thought, truly. But Graham wasn't so informed in the science of supernatural power transfer. But truly, who is? If Graham was more educated, though, he might have hesitated to attack in the way that he did. Obviously, Graham ignored all of this and simply just aimed and pulled the trigger. The only thought really going through Graham's head was to somehow stop Stuart in whatever way possible. Graham knew that regular bullets wouldn't work because a small force protection field surrounded anyone involved in the energy transfer. But he'd never tried electricity in order to pierce the shield, so he thought he'd give it a try. As Graham pulled the trigger with all his might, Christian looked up and saw, as if in slow motion, electric tendrils exit the barrel of Graham's gun and crawl their way in a web of light towards him and Graham. Apparently, however strong Stuart might have thought the force field was, its weakness seemed to definitely be electric shock. As the strands of electricity reached its destination, it didn't even hesitate to pierce the protective force shield. Then the thousands of electric bolts seemed to wrap both Christian and Stuart in a bright blanket of light. The pain that both individuals experienced was so intense that their bodies didn't even have the capability to translate the shock into pain, and so they both felt nothing but numbness. Gratefully, the power coursing through both of their bodies protected them from bodily harm. But the power itself was affected in the strangest way. Usually, the power could only rest within one body at a time, but the large amount of energy associated with the electricity actually split the transfer of power in half, stopping the power transfer completely and shutting down the force field. Right then, Stuart and Christian both had the power, but they would be weaker than usual, for they were now sharing the energy instead of one person having it all. But the electricity did more than Christian, Graham, or Stuart would ever know. In addition to splitting the power up, it supercharged both subjects' power to the max, and then all went quiet. The time that passed from the pull of the trigger to the utter silence was merely 10 seconds, but it had felt like ages for both Christian and Stuart. Graham was triumphant, for he truly thought he had stopped Stuart from gaining the superpowers he had craved himself.
"Ha! That's what you get for double-crossing me, Stuart. The only thing you ever deserved. Death.
At this word, Christian's mother realized the full weight of the situation and screamed out, "No! Christian! He can't be dead!" She started her way quickly to Christian's side, but was most violently stopped when Stuart's body convulsed and 4 metal arms burst from Stuart's side, flying into the air. Blood scattered from his arms after they had dug through Stuart's skin. Then Stuart stumbled to his feet and spoke with quite a different tone.
Thank you, Graham. I knew you were useful for something. And now you have given me my heart's desire. Though metal arms were never in my wishes, I think they're growing on me.
Christian was just sitting up when a large metal arm swung at high speed straight towards his face. The unstoppable metal appendage impacted so hard with Christian's face that he flew back, smacking his head hard on the back of a pew. Spit flew, and blood started to flow as Christian took blow after blow from the large metallic arms. Before he could take another hit, Christian shot a web to the tall ceiling and slingshotted straight up and out of the way.
Everyone, don't stay to watch. Run! Run far away!
Christian yelled at the top of his lungs. At this, people scattered faster than ants whose anthill had just been stepped on. But not everyone got away. A small girl named Lizzie had been snatched up by the neck and was dangling from one of Stuart's metal arms.
Stop, boy!
Stuart confidently commanded.
You make one more move, and I'll crush her skull.
Wait. Okay, I'm not moving. Just don't hurt her. Lizzie was struggling to breathe, with the arm like a metal vice around her neck. Stuart, right? Your name's Stuart. Whatever. Listen. What are you even doing anymore? You came here to get the power, right? Then what are you even doing? You're about to kill an innocent child. Is this what you wanted? Is this what you've become? A murderer? Christian spoke with great power, for an innocent life was on the line. Is that it, Stuart? Are you a murderer? Do you want to be known as the man who killed a child? Stuart's face softened the smallest amount as he took in what Christian said. The metal grip around Lizzie's neck slowly released, and Lizzie landed in a heap on the ground. She moved a little, reassuring Christian that she was not killed. Okay. Let's just discuss this like civilized humans. Can we do that, Stuart? Christian asked with great strain. But before Stuart said another word, a shot rang out, and Stuart started to topple. During the entire fight between Christian and Stuart, Graham had been hunkered in a corner, hoping not to get struck by a stray object tossed around from the brutal battle. But when the chaos had ceased, and Christian had started to reason with Stuart, Graham saw his chance to stop Stuart and maybe get his powers back. With Stuart's back turned toward Graham, Graham swiftly pulled his gun and shot one slug right into Stuart's head. As soon as Stuart's hulking octopus body started to topple, Christian had to get Lizzie out of the way of being crushed like a grape. He extended both arms, wrapped her in an extremely protective casing of web, and slung her behind him to the back of the auditorium. Lizzie crashed through the back viewing window and landed in the main meeting room, with a loud cacophony of smashing glass. Christian didn't have time to check on Lizzie's well-being, because Stuart crashed to the floor, shaking the whole room. Must-a eaten too much for dinner, Christian thought, but he knew that the metal arms must have added significant weight. Shortly after the dust settled, Graham and Christian watched in shock as a green mist exited Stuart's body and dissolved in the air, many feet above Stuart's eternally sleeping body.
No!
Graham yelled with all the passion left in his soul.
Curse you, Stuart! You took everything from me. My friends, my family, and now you took my powers. I'll never be invisible again.
Graham kneeled over and sobbed like a child who had lost a parent. The back doors burst open, and a swarm of police officers rushed in at high speed. "Everyone hands up!" one of the officers of the group yelled. Christian quickly kneeled and put his hands behind his head. But a tall, blonde officer came over to Christian. "You're good, kid. They told us the whole story on the phone. You helped distract the metal-armed dude, and it looks as if that crying Hulk over there shot him in the head." Christian wondered if whoever had dialed 911 had told about his spider powers, but he had no clue. As the other police led Graham away, the tall officer introduced himself. "Name's Justin Lark," the officer said as he extended his hand. "I truly don't know how you didn't die, kid. You're in the middle of the fight, from what I heard, but I guess all that matters is that your heart's still beating." Christian was relieved to hear that whoever had called the police had apparently not told about his true identity. "Well, thanks for showing up, sir," Christian nervously replied. "It's a good thing those criminals were taken care of." "Amen to that," Justin said, looking around the simply decorated church. "Well, we're out of here, kid," Justin said as some of the last officers filed out. "The extent of damage around here is a few pews cracked in half, and your chandeliers took a beating. Let's hope your church's insurance covers damage from octopus men." Justin laughed as he prepared to leave. "I'm not sure why, kid, but I have a feeling that I'll be seeing you again someday." Justin looked around the building and nodded his head, as if he was saying that he was satisfied with the situation. And then he walked out without another word. Chapter 5. Christian looked around at the destruction that had occurred, and he wondered if he had done the right thing in fighting Stuart. Maybe he should have led him outside, that way the building wouldn't have been harmed. But it was too late now. What was done, and as far as he knew, the only person who had died was a criminal that deserved it. He could have kept pondering the fight, but the back door of the auditorium creaked open, and Christian's mom rushed in with arms outstretched. She ran up to him and they embraced. "Oh, honey, you saved us. If you're thinking what you did was wrong, just come out and see all the people you saved." "How did you get those powers, though? It all seems so confusing. But let's talk about all of it when we get home." "Yeah, that sounds nice," Christian slowly replied, still wrapped in his mother's arms. His shirt was ripped, his face was bruised and bleeding, and his leg was dripping blood onto the floor. He then realized how badly his legs hurt, and so he limped slowly out of the auditorium, with one arm around his mother for support. As he entered the main meeting room, he saw all the members of the church congregating together, and then they all started clapping. Some came over and patted him on the back, and some just stood and stared. Christian couldn't help it, and he cracked a smile. Then his friend Eric walked over and put his arm around him, like Christian's mother had, and whispered, "Dang, Christian, I guess that's one way to impress the girls." Eric laughed and kept his arm around his buddy. Christian and Eric walked over to a bench so Christian could sit down and rest his strained muscles and aching head. When they sat, Eric laid his arm over Christian's shoulders, and his hand touched the bare skin of Christian's badly ripped-up arm. Right then, Christian felt like a bullet had sliced through his head, and pain bounced around every blood vessel in his head. He screamed a deep, painful yell and held his head in agony. In addition, he felt a slight shock on his shoulder, and Eric jerked away. "Ouch! Goodness, man, you sure have some static buildup. Are you okay? What happened to your head?" I'm fine. Christian grunted with clenched teeth. I need to get home." As Christian finally left the church with his family, he felt weaker than he had in a very, very long time. As Eric drove home with his parents, he contemplated all the chaos that had taken place in just the last hour. But his feelings started to change. His thoughts were confusing him, and dark ideas filled his mind. He kept thinking the same thing, over and over. To get firearms and serve justice. Bloody, bloody justice. Epilogue. A large, looming figure marched down a long hallway. Stone was everywhere. Stone walls, stone ceiling, stone statues, stone. All stone. As he reached the end of the hall, sunlight peeked through one of the few windows in this stone palace. The light made a line on the bulking figure's neck, revealing the dark purple skin of the brute. As he turned to pace down the hallway again, there was a rumble, and a stone door grumbled open, shining dull patterns of light on the palace floor. When the entrance was wide enough, a small figure scampered in like a mouse, kneeling before the master of the palace. The small man stuttered as he brought his news.
Lord Thanos, I have news about the super-powered individuals on Earth.
The small man kept his head down, afraid to peer at any part of his master. After a few seconds of silence, Thanos slammed his fist against the wall nearest him, cracking the stone wall and shaking the ground.
Spit it out, servant! I've waited long already. Too long.
The little man was rattled, but he managed to mutter out his message.
There has been...
But the small, insignificant creature was cut off as the large stone door opened again, but this time with more force. A tall, blond man strutted in with confidence, quite surpassing that of the small servant of Thanos. "Sorry to interrupt, your purpleness, but I think I can communicate what little Ralph couldn't."
Trelert, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be on Earth?
Thanos questioned as the tall being, Trelert, neared Thanos. Light from a window shined on Trelert, revealing a police badge and the blue uniform beneath.
Enough with the facade, Trelert. You know I hate humans.
Trelert reluctantly shrugged, and his appearance dissolved. The policeman uniform and face of Justin Lark dissipated, to be replaced by a green, grinning face. Black hair dangled from the creature's face, reaching its back. "Well, maybe I like being a boy sometimes, Thanos," Trelert stated with a new feminine voice.
Enough! Just give me the news and leave.
Trelert finally started her story. "The Power X you sent down was successful for a little while. Couple beings received some interesting abilities, but nothing that could compete with you. But just yesterday, the power was split into two beings."
What?
Thanos interrupted.
That's not possible.
"Well, obviously, you're not as good of a scientist as you thought, because two beings now have it. But I doubt it could happen again," Trelert replied, as if bored.
Any contenders?
Thanos asked with building hope. "Nope. Spider powers and octopus arms," Trelert replied.
Ah!
Thanos screamed, slamming his fist against the wall a second time. At this, little Ralk scampered off in fright.
Will I ever receive an opponent of equal power?
"Sir, you're spending all your time and energy trying to find an opponent to face. Why don't you instead enjoy your last days vacationing?"
No, Trelert. I'm going to die, but I've been given too much power. I must give it to a worthy man, so they can do good with it. It would be a waste to die with this much energy coursing through my veins.
"How do you even know the prophecy is true?" Trelert questioned with a desperate tone.
I can feel it, Trelert. It's very...
But Thanos was cut off by a buzzing device. Ah, that's my cue. It appears there's a violent battle going on back on Earth. Your power has found 2 contestants, it appears. Sounds mighty bloody. As Trelert turned away and walked to the exit, she said one last thing. You're a noble man, Lord Thanos. We'll find a contender someday. Just wait. Once Trelert was gone, Thanos sat down in his throne and cracked a smile. An evil smile. For his time was approaching, and the plan of giving his power to a human would never come to pass. But perhaps something more sinister. Then a skeletal hand rested on his bulky shoulder, and the creature whispered one word. Soon. This is Christian Smith, the writer and recorder of Trading Hands. This is the end of issue 1 of Trading Hands. Issue 2 is coming out soon.